I never thought I'd be sitting here, staring out the window of my corner office, feeling like I'd conquered the world and lost everything at the same time. The Chicago skyline stretched out before me, a testament to ambition and progress, much like the journey that had brought me to this moment. My name is Michael Reeves, and for the past 5 years, I've been the general manager of Pinnacle Industries, one of the Midwest's fastest-growing tech companies. From the day I stepped into this role, I believed that loyalty and hard work were the cornerstones of success. It wasn't just a job for me, it was a calling. Every decision, every late night, every missed family dinner, they were all steps towards creating a legacy I could be proud of. I watched our profit soar from a respectable few thousand a day to an astonishing $50,000. It was more than just numbers on a spreadsheet. It was a testament to my commitment, my vision, and the trust placed in me by the board and our employees. I remember the day we hit that milestone. The office was buzzing with energy, and I could feel the pride radiating from every corner. Sarah, my assistant, burst into my office with a bottle of champagne and a huge grin on her face. "We did it, boss," she exclaimed, her eyes shining with excitement. As I popped the cork and the bubbles flowed, I felt a surge of accomplishment. This was what I had worked so hard for. But even as the champagne flowed and the congratulations poured in, I couldn't shake the nagging feeling in the pit of my stomach. It was a feeling I'd grown accustomed to over the years, a mix of pride and unease, like oil and water swirling in my gut. You see, in the world of business, success often comes with a price, and mine was the constant battle between my ambitions and my family's expectations. I come from a long line of successful businessmen. The Reeves name has been synonymous with corporate success in Chicago for 3 generations. My grandfather started with a small manufacturing plant in the 1950s, and my father turned it into a multi-million-dollar corporation. And me? I was supposed to be the crowning jewel, the one who would take the family legacy to new heights. Don't get me wrong, I loved my family. I respected what they had built. But I also wanted to carve my own path, to prove that I could succeed on my own terms. That's why I had taken the job at Pinnacle instead of joining the family business straight out of college. It was my way of saying, I can do this on my own. But success is a double-edged sword, especially when you're trying to outrun your own shadow. Every achievement at Pinnacle was met with a mixture of pride from my colleagues and a subtle undercurrent of disappointment from my family. I could see it in my father's eyes at our weekly Sunday dinners. That look that said, "That's great, son, but when are you coming home?" Home. It was a loaded word. Was home the sleek, modern apartment I'd bought with my own money, or was it the sprawling family estate in the suburbs where I'd grown up? Was it the bustling office of Pinnacle where I spent most of my waking hours, or the quiet study in my parents' house where generations of Reeves men had made their most important decisions? These questions haunted me, even as I climbed the corporate ladder at Pinnacle. I found myself working harder and harder, pushing for bigger deals, more innovative products, anything to prove that I was worthy of the Reeves name, even if I wasn't directly contributing to the family business. There were moments of doubt, of course. Late nights when I'd sit in my office, staring at the family photo on my desk, my parents, my younger sister Emily, and me, all smiling at a barbecue from years ago. I'd wonder if I was making the right choice, if the price of my ambition was too high. But then I'd look at the other photo on my desk, the Pinnacle team at our last company retreat. Faces full of hope and determination, people who believed in me and the vision I had for the company. And I knew I couldn't let them down. It wasn't just about the money, though the profits were impressive. It was about building something meaningful, something that could change lives. We were working on cutting-edge technology that could revolutionize healthcare, make education more accessible, and connect people in ways they never thought possible. I remember the day we landed the Johnson account. It was a game-changer for Pinnacle, a contract that would put us on the map nationally. I had worked tirelessly for weeks, perfecting our pitch, anticipating every possible question. When the call came in that we'd won the bid, the entire office erupted in cheers. As I stood there, basking in the glow of our collective achievement, I felt a moment of pure, unadulterated joy. This was what I had dreamed of, leading a team to greatness, making a real difference in the world. But even in that moment of triumph, I couldn't help but think of my father. What would he say? Would he finally see that I was capable of great things on my own? Or would this just be another reminder of what I could have achieved if I had joined the family business? The internal conflict was taking its toll. I found myself working longer hours, pushing myself to the brink of exhaustion. My personal life began to suffer. Relationships came and went, always secondary to my career. Friends started to drift away, unable to compete with my punishing schedule. But I couldn't stop. The drive to succeed, to prove myself, had become an all-consuming fire. Every success just fueled the flames, pushing me to reach for more, to climb higher. It was during one of these late nights at the office that I had a moment of clarity. I was poring over some reports when I noticed a small error in the numbers. It wasn't major, just a minor discrepancy that most people would have overlooked. But as I dug deeper, I realized it was indicative of a larger issue, one that could have serious consequences if left unchecked. I spent the next week investigating, barely sleeping, fueled by a mixture of coffee and determination. When I finally presented my findings to the board, they were stunned. My diligence had uncovered a potential crisis and saved the company millions. The accolades poured in. I was hailed as a hero, the man who had saved Pinnacle from disaster. It should have been the crowning moment of my career. But as I stood there, accepting the praise and congratulations, I felt strangely hollow. I realized then that no matter how much I achieved, no matter how high I climbed, there would always be that voice in the back of my mind, my father's voice, asking if it was enough. The weight of legacy, the expectations of generations, it was all becoming too much to bear. As I sit here now, looking out over the city I love, I can't help but wonder what the future holds. I've proven myself time and time again, but at what cost? The bonds of blood that once brought me comfort now feel like chains, binding me to a fate I'm not sure I want. I know in my heart that my life is about to take a dramatic turn. The calm before the storm, they call it. I can feel the tension building, like electricity in the air before a thunderstorm. Whatever comes next, I know it will test me in ways I've never been tested before. But isn't that what life is all about? Facing challenges, overcoming obstacles, and emerging stronger on the other side? As I turn away from the window and back to my desk, I take a deep breath. Whatever comes, I'll face it head-on. After all, I'm a Reeves. It's in my blood. Little did I know that the true test of my strength was just around the corner, waiting to shatter the world I had so carefully built. I'll never forget that day. It was a crisp autumn morning in Chicago, the kind that makes you grateful for a warm cup of coffee and a cozy sweater. The leaves in Millennium Park were just starting to turn, painting the city in hues of gold and red. It should have been beautiful, but for me, it was the day my world came crashing down. I walked into the Pinnacle office that morning feeling on top of the world. We had just closed a deal that would expand our reach into the European market, and I was riding high on the success. The familiar buzz of the office, the clatter of keyboards, and the low hum of conversation felt like home. I nodded to Sarah as I passed her desk, and she gave me a thumbs up, our silent communication that everything was running smoothly. As I settled into my chair, I noticed a text from my father. Meet me for lunch. Noon. The usual place. Short and to the point, as always. I didn't think much of it at the time. Our lunches were a monthly occurrence, a chance for him to check in on me, and I suspected, to subtly remind me of my place in the family legacy. The morning flew by in a flurry of meetings and phone calls. Before I knew it, it was time to head out. I grabbed my coat and told Sarah I'd be back in an hour or so. If only I had known what was waiting for me. The usual place was Gibson's, an old-school steakhouse that had been my father's favorite for as long as I could remember. As I walked in, the familiar scent of aged beef and polished wood hit me. I spotted my father immediately, sitting in our regular booth, his silver hair neatly combed, his suit impeccable as always. "Michael," he said as I sat down, his voice carrying that mix of warmth and authority that I'd grown up with. "How's Pinnacle treating you?" We made small talk as we ordered. Ribeye for him, salmon for me. It was all so normal, so routine. I should have known something was off. Maybe I did, deep down, but I ignored the feeling. It wasn't until our plates were cleared and we were nursing our coffees that he dropped the bomb. "Your time at Pinnacle is over, Michael," he said, his voice cold and businesslike. "You're threatening my position as president of Reeves Enterprises. It's time for you to come home." For a moment, I thought I had misheard him. The words seemed to hang in the air between us, heavy and oppressive. "What are you talking about, Dad?" I managed to say, my voice sounding strange and distant to my own ears. He leaned forward, his eyes, so like my own, boring into me. "You've made quite a name for yourself at Pinnacle. Too much of a name. The board is starting to ask questions. They're wondering why my own son is out there making waves instead of helping to steer the family ship." I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. All the air seemed to leave my lungs at once. "But I thought you were proud of what I've accomplished," I said, hating how small my voice sounded. A flicker of something, regret? Pity? Crossed his face, but it was gone in an instant. "I am proud, son. But pride doesn't keep a company afloat. Loyalty does. And right now, your success is being seen as a threat to the family business." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. All those years of hard work, all the sacrifices I'd made. And for what? To be told that my success was a problem? That I was a threat? "So what, you want me to just walk away from Pinnacle? From everything I've built?" I asked, anger starting to replace the shock. He nodded, as if it was the most reasonable thing in the world. "You'll be given a position at Reeves Enterprises, of course. Executive Vice President. It's time you started learning the ropes, preparing to take over one day." One day. The words echoed in my head. One day, when he decided I was ready. When I had been sufficiently molded into the heir he wanted me to be. "And if I refuse?" I asked, already knowing the answer. His face hardened. "Then you're on your own, Michael. No more family support, no more connections. You'll be cut off completely." The threat hung between us, unspoken but clear. In the world of Chicago business, the Reeves name opened doors. Without it, those same doors would slam shut in my face. I stood up abruptly, my chair scraping loudly against the floor. A few heads turned our way, but I didn't care. "You can't do this," I said, my voice shaking with anger and disbelief. "It's already done," he replied calmly. "The board at Pinnacle will be informed this afternoon. You have until the end of the week to clear out your office." I stormed out of the restaurant, ignoring the curious looks from the other diners. The cool autumn air hit me like a slap in the face as I stepped outside. I stood there on the sidewalk, people bustling past me, going about their days as if the world hadn't just turned upside down. My phone buzzed in my pocket, probably Sarah, wondering where I was. I ignored it. I couldn't face going back to the office, not yet. Not when I knew it was all about to be taken away from me. I started walking, not caring where I was going. My mind was a whirlwind of emotions: anger, betrayal, fear. How could he do this to me? How could he just expect me to give up everything I'd worked for? I found myself in Millennium Park, standing in front of the Bean. I stared at my distorted reflection in its shiny surface, barely recognizing the man looking back at me. Was this really happening? As the reality of the situation started to sink in, I felt a deep, aching sense of loss. It wasn't just about the job, though that was bad enough. It was the betrayal. The knowledge that my own father, the man I had looked up to my entire life, could so callously throw me under the bus to protect his own position. I thought about all the people at Pinnacle who had put their trust in me. Sarah, who had been with me from the start. The young interns who looked at me with admiration, hoping to learn and grow under my leadership. The board members who had taken a chance on a young, ambitious manager. How could I face them now? As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the park, I finally headed back to the office. The familiar Pinnacle logo on the building now seemed to mock me. I rode the elevator up to my floor, dreading what I knew I had to do. Sarah was waiting for me as I stepped out. One look at my face and she knew something was wrong. "Michael? What happened?" I took a deep breath, steeling myself. "Call a meeting. Everyone. Now." The next hour was a blur. Standing in front of my team, seeing the confusion and concern on their faces as I told them I was leaving. The questions, the protests, the looks of disbelief. I did my best to keep my emotions in check, to sound confident and assured. But inside, I was screaming. After the meeting, I retreated to my office and closed the door. I sat at my desk, looking at the photos I'd carefully arranged over the years. The Pinnacle team at our last retreat. My family at my college graduation. My father and me at a Cubs game, both of us grinning widely. I picked up that last photo, studying it. Had it all been a lie? Had he always seen me as a threat, even back then? A soft knock on the door interrupted my thoughts. It was Sarah. She came in without waiting for a response, closing the door behind her. "Okay, boss," she said, sitting down across from me. "What's really going on?" I looked at her, this woman who had been my right hand for 5 years, who knew me better than almost anyone. And suddenly, I couldn't hold it in anymore. The whole story came pouring out. My father's ultimatum, the threat of being cut off, the impossible choice I was facing. Sarah listened without interrupting, her face a mix of sympathy and anger. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "So what are you going to do?" she finally asked. I shook my head. "I don't know. I really don't know." She leaned forward, her eyes intense. "Listen to me, Michael. You are not your father. You've built something amazing here, and you did it on your own merits. Don't let him take that away from you." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. She was right, of course. But the reality of going against my father, of potentially losing everything I'd grown up with, it was terrifying. As the night wore on and the office emptied out, I sat there, wrestling with the biggest decision of my life. The weight of legacy, the bitter sting of betrayal, the fear of an uncertain future, it all swirled together in a toxic mix. By the time the first rays of dawn started to peek through my office window, I had made my decision. It wasn't going to be easy, and the road ahead was uncertain. But I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to let anyone, not even my father, dictate my future. As I packed up my things, preparing to leave the office I had called home for 5 years, I felt a strange mix of emotions. Anger, yes. Hurt, definitely. But also, somewhere deep down, a spark of excitement. For the first time in my life, I was truly on my own. No family name to fall back on, no safety net. It was terrifying, but it was also liberating. I took one last look around the office, memories flooding back. The late nights, the victories, the setbacks we'd overcome. Then I turned off the lights and walked out, my head held high. Whatever came next, I was ready to face it. The betrayal had cut deep, but it had also set me free. Now it was time to show the world, and my father, what Michael Reeves was truly capable of. The weeks following my departure from Pinnacle were some of the darkest of my life. I found myself adrift, cut off from the world I had known and the future I had planned. My comfortable apartment in the heart of Chicago, once a symbol of my success, now felt like a gilded cage. The city I loved, with its bustling streets and towering skyscrapers, seemed to mock me with opportunities one could no longer grasp. I spent days in a haze, barely leaving my bed. The betrayal by my father had cut deeper than I could have imagined. It wasn't just the loss of my job or the threat to my career. It was the shattering of the image I had of my family, of my place in the world. Every time my phone buzzed with a message from a former colleague or a news alert about Pinnacle, I felt a fresh wave of pain and anger. But as the initial shock began to wear off, something else started to stir within me. A spark of determination, a refusal to be beaten down. I had always prided myself on my resilience, my ability to overcome challenges. This, I realized, was just another challenge, albeit the biggest one I had ever faced. I started small. First, I forced myself to establish a routine. Wake up at a decent hour, shower, get dressed as if I was going to work. It sounds simple, but in those early days, it felt like climbing a mountain. But each small victory, each day I managed to stick to my routine, felt like a step forward. Next, I turned my attention to my finances. I had always been smart with money, saving a significant portion of my Pinnacle salary. Now, I was grateful for that foresight. I had enough to keep me afloat for a while, but I knew I needed to be careful. I created a strict budget, cutting out all unnecessary expenses. My premium gym membership was replaced by runs along Lake Michigan. Dinners out at Chicago's finest restaurants became home-cooked meals. It was an adjustment, but there was a certain satisfaction in living simply, in proving to myself that I could survive without the trappings of my former life. As the fog of depression began to lift, I started to analyze my situation more objectively. I had lost my job, yes. I had been cut off from my family's connections and support. But what did I still have? Knowledge, experience, skills that I had honed over years of hard work. These were things that couldn't be taken away from me, no matter what my father did. I began to revisit every decision I had made at Pinnacle, every risk I had taken. Not with regret, but with a critical eye. What had I done right? What could I have done better? I started keeping a journal, filling it with ideas, strategies, lessons learned. It became a roadmap of sorts, a guide to rebuilding my career and my life. One particularly tough day, I found myself wandering the streets of my neighborhood. My feet carried me to a small, independent bookstore I had passed 100 times but never entered. Inside, the smell of old books and the quiet rustling of pages felt soothing. I picked up a book at random. It turned out to be Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. As I read about Frankl's experiences in Nazi concentration camps and his philosophy of finding purpose in the face of suffering, something shifted inside me. If he could find meaning in such horrific circumstances, surely I could find a way forward from my setback. Inspired, I threw myself into reading and learning. Books on business strategy, leadership, innovation, I devoured them all. But I also branched out into philosophy, psychology, even some classics I had neglected since college. Each book felt like a conversation with a wise friend, offering new perspectives and ideas. As my mind engaged with new concepts and challenges, I found my old energy returning. I started reaching out to former colleagues and contacts, not for jobs or favors, but for coffee and conversation. These meetings were sometimes awkward, as news of my fall from grace had spread through Chicago's business circles. But I pushed through the discomfort, focusing on reconnecting and learning about what was happening in the industry. It was during one of these coffee meetings that I had a revelation. I was chatting with Tom, a former client from Pinnacle, about the challenges his company was facing. As I listened and offered some suggestions, I realized that I was still the same person who had led Pinnacle to success. My skills, my insights, they were still valuable. The only thing that had changed was my circumstances. This realization was like a jolt of electricity. I might have lost my position, but I hadn't lost my abilities. In fact, freed from the constraints of corporate politics and family expectations, I might be able to achieve even more. I threw myself into consultancy work, starting small with former contacts who were willing to take a chance on me. Each project, each problem solved, felt like a step towards rebuilding my confidence and my reputation. I worked harder than I ever had before, often pulling all-nighters reminiscent of my early days at Pinnacle. But this time, every hour worked, every challenge overcome, was for me and me alone. As word spread about my work, I found myself being approached by startups and small businesses looking for guidance. These companies, scrappy and innovative, reminded me of why I had fallen in love with business in the first place. Their energy was infectious, and I found myself excited about the future in a way I hadn't been in years. One startup in particular caught my attention. They were working on an AI-driven platform for personalized education, a field I had always been passionate about. The founders, two brilliant but inexperienced programmers, had a great product but were struggling with the business side of things. I saw an opportunity not just to consult, but to really make a difference. I threw myself into the project, working closely with the founders to refine their business model, develop a marketing strategy, and prepare for their first round of funding. It was challenging work, often frustrating, but deeply satisfying. For the first time since leaving Pinnacle, I felt like I was building something meaningful again. The day of their pitch to investors was nerve-wracking. I wasn't officially part of the company, but I felt personally invested in their success. As I sat in the back of the room, watching the founders present the vision we had worked so hard to articulate, I felt a surge of pride. When the lead investor leaned forward, eyes bright with interest, and said, "This could change the game in education," I knew we had done it. The success of that startup opened new doors for me. Other companies sought me out, not just for consultancy, but for partnerships and advisory roles. I found myself at the center of a network of innovative, forward-thinking businesses. It was a different world from the corporate environment I had known, but I was surprised to find how much I enjoyed its dynamism and creativity. As my professional life began to flourish again, I also focused on personal growth. The betrayal by my father had left deep wounds, and I knew I needed to address them if I wanted to move forward. I started seeing a therapist, working through my feelings of anger and hurt. It wasn't easy. There were sessions where I left feeling raw and exhausted. But gradually, I began to gain perspective on what had happened. I realized that my father's actions, hurtful as they were, came from his own fears and insecurities. It didn't excuse what he had done, but understanding it helped me begin to let go of some of the anger I had been carrying. I also saw how my single-minded focus on proving myself had led me to neglect other important aspects of my life: friendships, relationships, personal interests. Slowly, I began to rebuild these areas of my life. I reconnected with old friends I had lost touch with during my pinnacle years. I started dating again, approaching relationships with a new openness and vulnerability. I even took up painting, something I had enjoyed in college but had abandoned in pursuit of my career. The act of creating something purely for the joy of it felt like a revolutionary act after years of focusing solely on business success. As months turned into a year, and then two, I looked back on my journey with a sense of amazement. The Michael Reeves who had walked out of Pinnacle that fateful day felt like a different person, younger, more naive, but also more burdened. The man I had become was battle-scarred, certainly, but also stronger, more resilient, and paradoxically, more optimistic about the future. I had gone through the fire, faced my worst fears, and come out the other side. Not unscathed, but unbroken. As I stood on the balcony of my new, more modest apartment, looking out over the Chicago skyline, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't experienced in years. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in my life, that uncertainty felt exciting rather than frightening. I had risen from the ashes of my old life. Now it was time to see how high I could soar. As I stood in my modest Chicago apartment, gazing out at the city's skyline, I felt a surge of excitement coursing through my veins. The past 2 years had been a roller coaster of emotions and experiences, but they had led me to this moment, the birth of a new dream. The idea had been percolating in my mind for months, born from the countless conversations I'd had with startups and small businesses. I'd seen firsthand the challenges these companies faced, particularly when it came to accessing the kind of high-level strategic advice that could make or break their success. Big consulting firms were out of reach for most of them, both financially and culturally. That's where I saw an opportunity. I envisioned a new kind of consultancy, one that would bridge the gap between the scrappy world of startups and the polished expertise of top-tier firms. We would offer not just advice, but hands-on support, tailored to the unique needs and constraints of emerging businesses. It would combine everything I'd learned at Pinnacle with the insights I'd gained during my time in the trenches with startups. The more I thought about it, the more excited I became. This wasn't just a business idea, it was a chance to create something meaningful to help shape the future of business in Chicago and beyond. It was a way to take all the lessons I'd learned, all the skills I'd honed, and use them to make a real difference. I spent weeks refining the concept, poring over business plans late into the night. My small apartment became a war room of sorts, with whiteboards covering the walls and sticky notes everywhere. I'd wake up in the middle of the night with new ideas, scribbling them down before they could slip away. It was exhausting, but exhilarating. For the first time since leaving Pinnacle, I felt truly alive. As the plan took shape, I realized I couldn't do this alone. I needed a team, people who shared my vision and could complement my skills. My network, rebuilt over the past 2 years, proved invaluable. I reached out to former colleagues, clients, and partners, sharing my idea and gauging interest. The response was overwhelming. People weren't just interested, they were excited. Many saw the same gap in the market that I did and were eager to be part of something new and innovative. Within a few weeks, I had assembled a core team of 5: myself, Sarah, my former assistant from Pinnacle who had become a skilled project manager, Tom, a brilliant financial analyst I'd worked with on several startup projects, Elena, a marketing guru with a knack for helping tech companies tell their stories, and Raj, a software engineer turned business strategist who brought a unique technical perspective to our work. We met for the first time as a team at a small coffee shop in Wicker Park. As I looked around the table at these talented individuals who had chosen to take a chance on my vision, I felt a mix of excitement and responsibility. "We're going to change the game," I told them. "We're going to help build the next generation of great companies." The energy in that meeting was electric. Ideas flew back and forth, each of us building on the other's thoughts. By the end of the day, we had a name for our new venture, Catalyst Consulting. It captured exactly what we wanted to be, a force that would accelerate the growth and success of our clients. The next few months were a whirlwind of activity. We secured a small office space in the West Loop, a neighborhood that had become a hub for tech startups and creative businesses. It wasn't fancy, just an open plan room with a few desks and a lot of whiteboard space, but it was ours. The day we moved in, hanging our Catalyst Consulting sign on the door felt like a major milestone. Launching a new business is never easy, and we faced our share of challenges. Funding was tight. We were bootstrapping the operation, using our savings and taking minimal salaries to get things off the ground. There were long nights and stressful moments, times when we questioned whether we were on the right path. But there were also moments of pure joy and satisfaction. Our first client meeting, where we walked a young tech startup through a strategy session and saw the light of understanding and excitement in their eyes. The day we landed our first major contract, a 6-month engagement with a promising fintech company. The first time we saw our logo on a client's pitch deck, listed proudly among their advisors and partners. As word spread about Catalyst, we found ourselves in increasing demand. Our unique approach, combining high-level strategy with practical, hands-on support, resonated with the startup community. We weren't just consultants. We were partners, rolling up our sleeves and working alongside our clients to bring their visions to life. One project in particular stands out in my memory. We were approached by a small healthcare tech startup that had developed an AI-driven platform for early disease detection. The technology was groundbreaking, but the founders were struggling to articulate its value to investors and potential partners. We dove into the project headfirst, immersing ourselves in the technology and the healthcare landscape. For weeks, our office was covered in medical diagrams and AI flowcharts. We brought in expert advisors, conducted user research, and worked closely with the startup's technical team to truly understand the potential of their innovation. The result was a comprehensive strategy that not only positioned the startup for its next funding round, but also laid out a clear path for bringing their technology to market. When the founders successfully closed a $10 million Series A round, citing our work as a key factor in their pitch, it felt like a validation of everything we were trying to achieve with Catalyst. As our reputation grew, we started to attract attention from larger players in the Chicago business scene. Established companies reached out, interested in tapping into our innovative approach and startup expertise. It was flattering, but it also presented a dilemma. We had started Catalyst to help emerging businesses. Did we risk losing our focus if we took on bigger clients? After much discussion and soul-searching, we decided to stay true to our original vision. We would work with larger companies, but only on projects that aligned with our mission of fostering innovation and growth in the startup ecosystem. This might mean helping a Fortune 500 company set up an internal incubator, or advising on partnerships with emerging tech firms, but we would not become just another corporate consultancy. This decision proved to be the right one. Our unique position, straddling the worlds of scrappy startups and established corporations, became our greatest strength. We were able to facilitate connections and collaborations that might never have happened otherwise, creating value not just for our clients, but for the broader business community. As Catalyst grew, so did our impact. We started hosting workshops and events, sharing our knowledge and bringing together entrepreneurs from across the city. Our office became a hub of activity, with clients and partners dropping in for impromptu brainstorming sessions or to use our meeting spaces. The energy was infectious, and I often found myself marveling at what we had created. Of course, success brought its own challenges. As demand for our services increased, we had to carefully manage our growth to maintain the quality and personal touch that had become our hallmark. We were selective about the clients we took on and the people we hired, always prioritizing cultural fit and shared values over pure talent or experience. There were moments when the pressure felt overwhelming. Late nights when I'd find myself alone in the office, surrounded by the remnants of the day's meetings and brainstorming sessions, wondering if I was really cut out for this. The ghost of my father's disapproval still haunted me at times, whispering doubts in my ear. But then I'd think about our clients, the passionate founders and innovators we were helping to succeed. I'd remember the look on a young entrepreneur's face when we helped them overcome a seemingly insurmountable obstacle, or the excitement in our team's eyes when we cracked a particularly tough problem. And I'd know, deep in my bones, that this was exactly where I was meant to be. As we approached the end of our second year, Catalyst had grown beyond my wildest dreams. We had a team of 20 talented individuals, a portfolio of successful clients, and a reputation as one of the most innovative consultancies in the Midwest. We were making a real difference, not just in the businesses we worked with, but in the broader entrepreneurial ecosystem of Chicago and beyond. Standing in our office one evening, watching the sun set over the Chicago skyline, I felt a profound sense of gratitude and purpose. The journey hadn't been easy, but every challenge, every setback had led me to this point. I had taken the knowledge and experience I'd gained at Pinnacle, combined it with the lessons learned during my darkest days, and created something truly unique and valuable. Catalyst wasn't just a business, it was a testament to the power of resilience, innovation, and staying true to one's vision. As I turned off the lights and headed home, I couldn't help but smile. The dream that had been born in the ashes of my old life had taken flight, and I couldn't wait to see how high it would soar. The launch of Catalyst Consulting wasn't just the beginning of a new chapter in my life, it was a declaration of war. Not against any particular person or company, but against the old guard of Chicago's business world, the entrenched powers that had once seemed so immovable. Including, of course, my father and Reeves Enterprises. From day one, we faced an uphill battle. The established consulting firms in the city viewed us with a mixture of amusement and disdain. To them, we were upstarts, a flash in the pan that would burn out as quickly as we had appeared. I heard through the grapevine that my father had dismissed Catalyst as a cute little project when asked about it at a business luncheon. Those words stung, but they also fueled my determination. We would show them all what this cute little project could do. Our first few months were a whirlwind of activity. We worked around the clock, taking on any client who would give us a chance. No project was too small, no challenge too daunting. We helped a local craft brewery optimize their distribution strategy. We worked with a tech startup to refine their pitch deck, leading to a successful seed round. We even advised a family-owned bakery on how to expand their online presence. Each success, no matter how small, felt like a victory. But we knew that to truly make our mark, we needed to land a big fish, a client that would make the business world sit up and take notice. That opportunity came in the form of Green Tech Innovations, a promising clean energy startup that was making waves in the industry. They were developing a new type of solar panel that was significantly more efficient than anything else on the market. The technology was groundbreaking, but they were struggling to scale up production and attract the level of investment they needed. When they approached us, I knew this was our chance. We threw everything we had into the project, working day and night to develop a comprehensive strategy for green tech. We didn't just look at their immediate challenges, we reimagined their entire business model, from supply chain to marketing to long-term growth plans. The day we presented our findings to GreenTech's board was one of the most nerve-wracking of my life. As I stood in front of that room, I could feel the weight of everything we'd built riding on this moment. But as I began to speak, laying out our vision for GreenTech's future, I felt a sense of calm wash over me. This was what we were meant to do. By the end of the presentation, the energy in the room was electric. The board members were leaning forward in their seats, eyes bright with excitement. When the CEO stood up and said, "This is exactly what we've been looking for," I knew we had done it. The Green Tech project was a turning point for Catalyst. Within weeks of implementing our strategy, they secured a $50 million investment round and signed partnerships with 2 major energy companies. The business press took notice, and suddenly Catalyst was being hailed as the hot new player in the consulting world. As our reputation grew, so did the challenges we faced. Larger, more established firms started to see us as a threat. We found ourselves being undercut on bids, and there were whispers of a smear campaign being run against us in certain circles. It was a stark reminder that success often breeds resentment. But we didn't let it deter us. If anything, the opposition made us more determined. We doubled down on our commitment to innovation and hands-on support, continually refining our approach to stay ahead of the curve. We also started to be more selective about the clients we took on, focusing on those who truly aligned with our values and vision. One particularly satisfying moment came when we were invited to pitch for a major contract with Midwest Energy, one of the largest utility companies in the region. It was the kind of project that typically went to one of the big 4 consulting firms, certainly not to an upstart like Catalyst. As we prepared for the pitch, I couldn't help but think about my father. Midwest Energy was a longtime client of Reeves Enterprises, and I knew he would be furious at the mere thought of us competing for their business. Part of me wondered if he would try to interfere, to use his influence to shut us out. But as we walked into the boardroom at Midwest Energy, those thoughts faded away. We were here on our own merits, and we were going to show them exactly what Catalyst was capable of. Our presentation was a tour de force. We didn't just offer generic strategies. We came with specific, actionable plans tailored to Midwest Energy's unique challenges. We showcased our deep understanding of the changing energy landscape and our track record of driving innovation in the sector. When we finished, there was a moment of silence. Then the CEO leaned forward and said, "I've got to hand it to you. This is unlike anything we've seen before. You've given us a lot to think about." 2 weeks later, we got the call. Catalyst had won the contract. It was a seismic shift in the Chicago business world. The headlines in Crain's Chicago Business said it all. Upstart Catalyst Consulting beats out giants for Midwest Energy contract. The victory was sweet, but it also marked the beginning of a new phase in our battle for respect. Now that we had proven ourselves capable of competing at the highest levels, the knives really came out. We faced increased scrutiny, with every decision and every client outcome put under a microscope. There were tough moments. A project that didn't go as planned led to negative press. A key team member was poached by a rival firm. There were days when the pressure felt overwhelming, when I questioned whether we had bitten off more than we could chew. But for every setback, there were multiple victories. We continued to innovate, to push boundaries. We launched a pro bono program to support promising startups that couldn't afford our regular fees. We initiated partnerships with local universities, bringing fresh talent and ideas into our team. Through it all, our core team remained strong. Sarah, Tom, Elena, and Raj had been with me from the beginning, and their loyalty and dedication never wavered. We had grown from that initial group of 5 to a team of over 50, but we worked hard to maintain the culture of innovation and collaboration that had defined us from the start. As our 3rd year drew to a close, Catalyst had become a force to be reckoned with in the Chicago business scene. We were no longer the scrappy upstart. We were a respected player, known for our innovative approaches and our ability to drive real change for our clients. The ultimate validation came in a form I never expected. I was at a charity gala, one of those black tie events that fill the social calendars of Chicago's business elite. As I mingled with the crowd, I overheard a conversation between 2 CEOs I recognized. "Have you worked with Catalyst yet?" one asked. "Just finished a project with them," the other replied. I've got to say, they're the real deal. Completely changed the way we think about our business. As I stood there, trying not to look like I was eavesdropping, I felt a tap on my shoulder. I turned to find myself face to face with Robert Chin, the CEO of one of Chicago's most successful tech companies. "Michael Reeves," he said, extending his hand. "I've been hoping to meet you. I've heard great things about Catalyst." I'd love to talk about how we might work together. As we chatted, I caught sight of my father across the room. He was watching us, his expression unreadable. For a moment, our eyes met. I expected to see anger or resentment, but instead, there was something else, a flicker of what might have been respect. In that moment, I realized that we had done it. Catalyst had earned its place at the table. We had fought our way to respect, not through family connections or old boy networks, but through hard work, innovation, and an unwavering commitment to our vision. As I left the gala that night, walking out into the cool Chicago evening, I felt a sense of pride and accomplishment unlike anything I had experienced before. The battle for respect had been long and hard, but we had emerged victorious. And the best part? This was just the beginning. Catalyst was poised for even greater things, and I couldn't wait to see what the future held. The Chicago skyline glittered before me, a testament to the ambition and drive that had built this great city. And now, in our own small way, Catalyst was part of that story. We had earned our place, and we were here to stay. As I stood at the podium, looking out over the sea of faces at the Chicago Business Leaders Annual Gala, I couldn't help but feel a sense of surreal triumph. Just 5 years ago, I had been cast out, betrayed by my own father, and left to fend for myself in the cutthroat world of Chicago business. Now, here I was, being honored as the Entrepreneur of the Year. The journey flashed before my eyes as I began my speech. The late nights, the countless cups of coffee, the moments of doubt and fear. But also the victories, big and small, that had brought Catalyst Consulting to where it was today, a powerhouse in the consulting world, respected not just in Chicago, but across the country. Success isn't about never falling down, I said, my voice steady despite the emotion welling up inside me. It's about how you get back up. It's about taking your failures and turning them into fuel for your future triumphs. As I spoke, I caught sight of a familiar face in the crowd. My father, George Reeves, sat at a table near the front, his expression unreadable. Our eyes met for a brief moment, and I felt a complex mix of emotions, anger, hurt, but also a strange sense of gratitude. After all, his betrayal had been the catalyst that sparked my greatest success. After the speech, as I mingled with the crowd, accepting congratulations and fielding questions about Catalyst's next big move, I saw my father making his way towards me. For a moment, I considered turning away, avoiding the confrontation. But I stood my ground. I was no longer the young man desperate for his approval. I was Michael Reeves, founder and CEO of Catalyst Consulting, and I had nothing to prove to anyone. "Congratulations, son," he said as he reached me, his voice gruff but not unkind. "You've done well for yourself." I nodded, unsure how to respond. It was the first time we'd spoken directly in years. I may have made a mistake," he continued, the words seeming to pain him. "When I pushed you out, I thought I was protecting the family business, but..." He trailed off, looking around at the room full of Chicago's business elite, many of whom were now my clients or partners. The regret in his eyes was unmistakable. "You were right," I said, surprised by the lack of bitterness in my own voice. "It was a mistake, but it was also the best thing that could have happened to me." We talked for a while longer, awkwardly at first, then with increasing openness. He told me about the struggles Reeves Enterprises had faced in recent years, how they'd failed to innovate and adapt to the changing business landscape. I found myself offering advice, drawing on the experiences I'd gained with Catalyst. As we parted ways, my father hesitated, then pulled me into a brief, stiff hug. "I'm proud of you, Michael," he said quietly. I should have said that a long time ago. The words I had longed to hear for so many years now felt bittersweet. I appreciated them, but I no longer needed them. I had found my own path, my own source of pride and fulfillment. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of media interviews, speaking engagements, and new client meetings. Catalyst's profile had never been higher, and we were fielding offers and opportunities from all directions. It was exciting, but also exhausting. One particularly hectic Tuesday, I found myself with a rare free hour between meetings. On a whim, I decided to take a walk, ending up in Millennium Park. As I sat on a bench, Watching the clouds reflect in the shiny surface of the bean, I found myself reflecting on the journey that had brought me here. I thought about the young, ambitious Michael who had first joined Pinnacle Industries, so eager to prove himself. I thought about the broken man who had walked out of that restaurant after his father's betrayal, feeling like his world had ended. And I thought about the Michael of today, successful, respected, but also tired, and, if I was honest with myself, a little lonely. Yes, Catalyst was thriving. We were doing work I was genuinely proud of, helping businesses innovate and grow in ways that benefited not just their bottom line, but their employees and communities as well. But in the relentless pursuit of success, had I neglected other important aspects of my life? I thought about Sarah, Tom, Elena, and Raj, my core team, the ones who had been with me from the start. They were more than colleagues, they were friends, family even. But when was the last time we had all sat down together, not to discuss business, but just to enjoy each other's company? And what about a personal life? I had dated on and off over the years, but nothing serious. Always too busy, too focused on the next big deal or client. Was I missing out on something fundamental? As I sat there, lost in thought, a young woman approached me. She looked familiar, and after a moment, I placed her. She was part of a startup team we had advised a few months back. "Mr. Reeves," she said hesitantly. "I'm sorry to bother you, but I just wanted to say thank you. The advice you gave us, it changed everything. We just closed our series of funding, and it's all thanks to you and your team." Her words warmed me, reminding me of why I had started Catalyst in the first place. It wasn't just about proving myself or making money. It was about making a difference, about helping others achieve their dreams. "That's wonderful news," I told her sincerely. "But remember, we just gave you the tools. You're the ones who did the hard work. Be proud of what you've accomplished." As she walked away, a new sense of purpose filled me. Yes, I had achieved success beyond my wildest dreams. But there was still so much more to do, so many more lives to impact. I pulled out my phone and sent a quick message to Sarah, Tom, Elena, and Raj. "Dinner tonight, my place. No shop talk allowed." Their responses came back quickly, all affirmative, all expressing excitement at the chance to just hang out like old times. Next, I called my sister Emily. We had drifted apart in recent years, caught up in our own busy lives. It was time to change that. We made plans for brunch that weekend. As I walked back to the office, I felt lighter than I had in years. The triumph of my professional success was sweet, but it was the promise of reconnecting with the people who mattered most that truly excited me. Back at Catalyst, I gathered my leadership team for an impromptu meeting. "We've achieved amazing things," I told them. "But I think it's time we thought about what's next. Not just in terms of business growth, but in how we can make an even bigger impact." We spent the next few hours brainstorming ideas. A mentorship program for underprivileged youth interested in business and technology. A fund to support social entrepreneurs. Partnerships with local schools to improve STEM education. The energy in the room was electric, reminiscent of those early days when we were just starting out. That evening, as I prepared dinner for my friends, I found myself humming a tune, something I hadn't done in years. The doorbell rang, and I opened it to find Sarah, Tom, Elena, and Raj, all bearing bottles of wine and wide smiles. As we sat around my dining table, laughing and sharing stories that had nothing to do with work, I felt a sense of contentment wash over me. This, I realized, was the true measure of success, not the awards or the money, but the relationships we build and the lives we touch along the way. Later that night, after my friends had left and I was alone again, I took out a pen and paper and began to write. Not a business plan or a strategy document, but a letter to my younger self. I wrote about the challenges he would face, the betrayals and the triumphs. I wrote about the importance of perseverance, of staying true to your values, even when it seems like the whole world is against you. But most of all, I wrote about balance. About the need to cultivate not just professional success, but personal fulfillment as well. About the joy of true friendship, the warmth of family reconciliation, and the satisfaction of making a positive impact on the world. As I finished the letter, I realized that this wasn't just a message to my past self. It was a roadmap for my future, a reminder of what truly matters, and a promise to never lose sight of it again. I folded the letter and placed it in my desk drawer. Then I walked to the window, looking out at the Chicago skyline. The city lights twinkled, full of promise and possibility. I had come so far, but I knew that the most exciting chapter of my journey was just beginning. With a smile, I turned away from the window and headed to bed. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, and new chances to make a difference. And this time, I was ready to face them not just as a successful businessman, but as a whole person, triumph, regrets, and all.